Right now, as you watch this, there are 8 billion human beings alive on Earth. There was almost a time when you could have counted us all in an afternoon. Think about that number for a moment. 8 billion. Cities stacked with people, planes crossing every sky, voices in 100 languages filling the air at this very second. It feels permanent. It feels like we were always going to be here. But hidden inside your own body is a strange clue that says otherwise. A clue that points back to a moment when our entire species came terrifyingly close to vanishing completely. Tonight, let's follow that clue. Let's find the day humans almost went extinct. The clue is written in your genes. You'd expect a species spread across the whole planet, 8 billion strong, to be wildly varied. And on the surface, we look it. Different faces, different heights, different colors. But underneath, where it really counts, something odd shows up. Genetically, humans are almost eerily alike. Here is the fact that stops scientists in their tracks. Take a single group of chimpanzees living on one hillside in Africa. That one small group can carry more genetic variety inside it than the entire human race put together. All 8 billion of us, across every continent, are more similar to one another than a few dozen chimps in the same forest. That is not what you'd see in a species with a long, stable history. That is what you'd see in a species that was once squeezed down to almost nothing and then rebuilt itself from a tiny handful of survivors. Scientists have a name for that kind of event. They call it a population bottleneck. Imagine the whole of humanity poured through the narrow neck of a bottle. Almost everyone is lost. Only a thin trickle makes it through to the other side. And everyone alive afterward, forever, descends from that thin trickle. The question is, what nearly destroyed us? When was the day we almost ended? For one leading idea, you have to travel to the island of Sumatra, roughly 74,000 years ago. There, a volcano named Toba did not simply erupt, it detonated. It was one of the largest eruptions our planet has seen in millions of years, hundreds of times more powerful than any volcano in living memory. It tore a hole in the earth so vast that the crater it left behind is now a lake you could lose a city in. An anthropologist named Stanley Ambrose looked at this eruption and at the strange thinness of our genetic family tree, and he proposed something chilling. What if these two things were connected? When Toba blew, it threw an unimaginable amount of ash and gas high into the atmosphere. Ambrose suggested this could have blocked the sun, dropping temperatures around the world and triggering what's called a volcanic winter. A sky gone gray, years of unnatural cold, plants failing, the animals that ate the plants dying, and the humans who ate the animals starving in the dark. In this picture, our ancestors were caught in a global catastrophe with no warning and nowhere to run. And according to some estimates, the human population may have crashed to just a few thousand individuals. By the most dramatic readings, perhaps only 1,000 or so people capable of having children were left anywhere on Earth. Sit with that. Not 1,000 people in a country, 1,000 people on the entire planet. Every human being who has ever lived since, every emperor, every artist, every person you have ever loved, every face in those crowded cities, all of it threaded back through that one desperate moment. So, how did anyone survive at all? To understand how a species squeezes through the neck of the bottle, you can look at the work of an archaeologist named Marean, who spent years digging into the caves at a place called Pinnacle Point on the southern coast of South Africa. What Marean found there is a story of survival against a brutal world. During the harsh, cold, dry stretches of the ice ages, much of Africa would have become hostile and empty. But at the very edge of the continent, where the land meets the sea, a small band of humans found a refuge. They turned to the ocean. They gathered shellfish from the rocks, one of the earliest clear signs of humans systematically eating from the sea. They used fire to transform stone into better tools. They ground red ochre, a sign of minds that thought in symbols. In a world that was trying to kill them, a tiny population clung to a single stretch of coast and held on. Marean has argued that places like this, small protected pockets of plenty, may have been where humanity waited out its worst times. Not a species spread thin across the globe, but a few small groups in a few lucky refuges, carrying the whole future of humanity on their backs. This is how you pass through the bottleneck, not by being everywhere, by surviving somewhere. But here is where an honest story has to slow down, because science is not finished arguing about this. The dramatic version of the Toba catastrophe, the one where the volcano nearly wiped us out, has been seriously challenged. An archaeologist named Michael Petraglia and his colleagues dug at a site in India called Jwalapuram, directly beneath and above the layer of ash that Toba left behind, and they found stone tools on both sides of that ash. People were living there before the eruption, and people were still making tools there afterward. In other words, in at least some places, life carried on. Other evidence, from lake beds in Africa and beyond, suggests Toba's winter may have been less apocalyptic and less global than Ambrose first imagined. So the bottleneck in our genes is real, but whether one volcano caused it, or whether it built up slowly over a much longer, harder stretch of time, is still genuinely debated. The clue inside you is certain. The culprit is not. And then, just when you think you understand how close it was, the story reaches back even further. In 2023, a team of researchers led by scientists including Wang Jiehu and Haipeng Li used a new method to read the ancient history hidden in modern DNA, and they reported something staggering. They found evidence of a bottleneck far older than Toba, around 900,000 years ago. In their reconstruction, the ancestors of all humans alive today may have collapsed to roughly 1,000 breeding individuals and then stayed that small, that fragile, for over 100,000 years. 100,000 years balanced on a knife's edge, with the entire human lineage hanging by a thread. This finding, too, is debated. Other scientists question the method and the timing, but the picture it paints is unforgettable. It suggests that for an enormous stretch of our deep past, we were not the dominant species we imagine. We were rare. We were vulnerable. We were, more than once, a single bad century away from being erased entirely. Now look up from all of this, and look at the world around you. Look at the crowds, the cities, the 8 billion, and understand what they actually are. Every single one of those people is a descendant of survivors. Not the lucky average, the survivors. The ones who found the refuge, who reached the coast, who kept the children alive through the cold and the hunger and the dark. You did not come from a species that was always safe. You came from a species that was nearly lost and clawed its way back. The strange sameness in your genes is not a flaw, it is a scar. It is the mark left by the narrow place we all passed through together. There is something almost dizzying in that. The people who almost weren't became everyone. The thin trickle that made it through the bottle's neck became a flood that covered the planet. And it means that you, sitting here, are not a small or ordinary thing. You are the far end of an unbroken chain of survivors that stretches back through every near miss, every volcanic winter, every desperate generation that refused to be the last. Right now, as you watch this, there are 8 billion human beings alive on Earth. There was almost a time when there were almost none. The fact that there are so many of us now is not a given. It is not an accident. It is the most improbable comeback in the history of life on this planet. You are the proof that they made it. So the next time the world feels too crowded, too loud, too full of people, remember how close it came to being silent. Remember the 1,000 who held the line in the dark. And remember that every one of those 8 billion faces, including yours, is a small, stubborn miracle that almost never happened at all.